This is the Golden Rule Podcast, where the host is always right, even if he doesn't know what he's talking about, which, on this show, is all the time because we don't tell him the topics beforehand. Enjoy!
Welcome to this episode of the Golden Rule Podcast. I am your host, Ezekiel Sprague. I'll get to my co-hosts and producers in a second. If you haven't listened to us before, this is the podcast, as so eloquently spoken in the intro, where the host is always right, even though he has no idea what he's talking about, because my co-hosts and producers have not told me anything about any of our topics of conversation going into any episode. So I have no idea what they're about to ask me or what we're about to talk about. They have preparation on their computers and iPads. I'm sitting here with just my thoughts in my brain about wondering what terrible question they could ask me this time. So guys, Paul Barnett, my co-host and producer, and Rob Yates, my other co-host and producer. We can still, since we're still early in, kind of introduce why this is the idea for our podcast, and then we'll get into the topic.
Yeah, sure. The conception for this podcast came around when Zeke was right one time.
Just once.
Pretty much just once. And it stuck ever since then that Zeke is just always right. So it started with we were talking about the 4th and 26 play, which is famous in Philadelphia Eagles history. Freddie Mitchell caught a huge bomb from Donovan McNabb to get a first down and basically secure a victory for the Philadelphia Eagles against the Green Bay Packers. I thought that game was at Lambeau Field. Turns out I was wrong.
Yes, I vividly knew that it was at Lincoln Financial Field. It was at home, and after Paul said that, and I found out I was right, I said, "See, Paul, I'm always right." And ever since then, they always think they think I think I'm always right. I think to this day, I don't always think I'm right, but I'm cool with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just that, now, since then, in the way that you talk in superlatives about what the best is and the worst is, and, whether that's a definitive yes, definitive no, whatever, that, you're just always right.
One of these days I'll have to discuss, have I gotten any better at this, or am I still as ridiculous as I was in high school?
I'm going to say you're still
yes, 100%.
Okay, maybe that'll be a topic for another day that you guys will just randomly bring up.
It's evolved a little bit,
yeah,
but
okay,
cool. You're still as opinionated as you've ever been.
Okay.
That has not changed.
I can accept that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're all three friends from high school. I graduated the year after Zeke and Rob, but we've been friends for a long time, so we know each other pretty well.
Pretty well.
So that's why they're able to ask me these questions with me having no idea, knowing that it should produce a decent conversation. I would hope that they know me well enough to know topics that'll do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one's a doozy.
I think you're going to like it.
So, I'm nervous as always because I have no idea what we're going to do.
Should I go ahead and introduce this one?
Paul, why don't you introduce it?
Hey, Zeke.
Oh, no.
Should steroids be legal in baseball?
Okay. All right. And as we know, I'm a big baseball fan. It is my number one sport. I played into college a little bit. I love baseball. We're recording this as the Philadelphia Phillies are currently in the NLCS for the first time in over a decade. I forgot how much I love baseball until this has occurred. Rob and I were actually talking about this, me having no idea before the podcast. Or I don't know if it was Rob or Paul, to be honest with you at this point. Today's been a little bit of a blur.
It was Rob.
It was Rob. About how much I love baseball. No, it was you.
Oh,
I was
it was
talking
me.
about that watching playoff baseball is like watching a loved one. I heard this on the radio today. A loved one defuse a bomb, because it is the most nerve-wracking sport in the playoffs. Maybe there is, except for overtime hockey in the playoffs, because at any moment, one pitch could change the game. Unlike the reason I think I found out that I don't like the NBA as much or have kind of weaned on professional football in the NFL is because you can score in the first quarter of a game and it affects the game to an extent, but by the end of the game, it really doesn't matter. Where last night the Phillies played really well and they were up 4-2, but then in later innings, there was a chance for a person on the Padres to hit a 3-run home run. One bad pitch, that could happen. The Phillies all of a sudden don't have a lead anymore, and they lose, and I'm in a miserable mood. So I have fallen more in love with baseball than ever, so I'm happy we did not make this podcast until now. I've talked about this a ton. I work at a sports broadcasting camp for kids. This used to be the number one topic of conversation we talk about. Do I think steroids should be legal in baseball? With the money that they are making, in professional sports. Professional baseball used to be the only exhibit of absorbent money. Now other sports have caught up to it. If everyone is in agreement to allow steroids, I think the answer is yes. Now, I'm not a medical professional and know the background of and I know somewhat of what steroids can do. I don't know the especially 90s steroids. When steroids were popular, those steroids probably were not good for your health in the long run. I don't know if the science has advanced on them. I am not up to speed on that because it's not really a topic of conversation anymore because it's not allowed. I'm sure there's some people that are still taking steroids. Tatis got caught this year, but that's neither here nor there. But I think if everybody's saying, you know what, this isn't a sport where we're hitting each other, football definitely not. There's no way you could ever allow steroids because they're already physical freaks, right? So there's contact.
We'll return to that.
We'll get turned to that. But baseball is a sport that you're not making contact with the other people on the field. You're not causing them bodily harm unless you catch a fastball upside the head or the hand, but that happens no matter what. That's not going to change that much. If everybody comes to an agreement, if there was a collective bargain agreement where the players and the owners said, you know what, remember how much money we used to make in the 90s from TV rights and how many people followed McGwire versus Sosa because there were so many home runs? The game has already devolved enough to where it's a home run or a strikeout a lot. I don't like it as a baseball purist, but for baseball productivity and money reasons, I don't see why not if you said, you know what, we'll look at the long-term effects of the medicine, but if everybody agrees, you know what, Mike Trout, you can use steroids. You're already one of the greatest players of all time. You're having injury issues. Use them to help you stay healthy so we can keep you on the field. Jacob deGrom, you're already one of the greatest pitchers of all time. You also have injury issues. Maybe the steroids will help you stay on the field. I don't see how it could hurt baseball as a game because they're not hurting each other.
Okay, so I want to just so we're on the same field of understanding. That's a weird way to phrase that. So like you just mentioned like steroid use in like two instances where it was like players who were injured. You like for you it doesn't really matter in this case what the steroids are doing, what the drugs they're taking are doing. It's a matter of like
I would think if you make it legal that they would have drugs that would be monitored by the professionals. You wouldn't be going to, when it wasn't illegal, the sketchy guy down the street in the strip mall. Literally, that is what happened with the Balco stuff. They were in a strip mall saying, what can you give me? What can I rub on my body to hit a ball further? If it was legal in professional baseball, I think the doctors would be giving it to them. They could monitor it, see how it was affecting a person. Now, like I said, I'm not a doctor. It could go really bad. But I think that allows it to be safe, quote unquote. I mean, A-Rod's still a productive human being. Barry Bonds, to my knowledge and extent, is a productive human being. Jose Canseco probably took more steroids than anybody else. Besides getting knocked in the head by Visek Kahema, is still productive, like normal human being. And I think if it's monitored and legal in the professional baseball, I think it's even more so of a
But for you, it's not a matter of like, like helping with injuries. It's like any type of drug for whatever reason, as long as it's safe and monitored, you're like on board with.
It makes the sport more entertaining. It makes them more money. I think in the long run, that's the whole entire point of them in the business. I think it would make the sport more entertaining because they're throwing so hard already and they're hitting the ball so far already. But I think it would make the game in the long run a more entertaining game for the fringe fans. I'm one who thinks baseball is like disappearing. I don't think people enjoy it anymore. As much as NBA was never close to baseball. Like Jordan was close to baseball. Magic versus Bird was close to baseball. Baseball was always number one. Then football passed it, and it has for a while now. But basketball is never close. Basketball is number 2 in the country by far now. So if I'm baseball, I want to catch back up to basketball. Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. There's a whole numbers argument and records we can get to later. But I don't see why not.
You said a few minutes ago that you were a baseball purist and that
I love baseball.
You didn't like that, it was either a strikeout or a home run almost every at bat.
Yes.
So what do you mean when you say that you're a baseball purist?
I played baseball, and in particular, I played catcher. So when I sit down to watch a baseball game, I'm going to watch it different than 99% of the people that sit down to watch baseball games. I'm going to watch it differently than even like 60 to 70% of the people that played high school baseball sit down and watch it. Because when you're a catcher in baseball, you're literally thinking of every single pitch, where it should go, what the best option is in this moment. So I love the pure sense of baseball, of every single thing mattering in the game, and every single moment, every single pitch being a big deal. Because the other day we saw in the Phillies' previous series, Zach Wheeler pitched phenomenal, amazing. Lost 3-0 because Rhys Hoskins made an error on a play that he usually makes sometimes. But that one pitch was all that mattered in the whole entire game. Like, it would have went to extra innings. The Phillies didn't score any runs. But that one pitch is all that mattered because that's where all the runs almost came from. So that's what I mean, purist, is I love breaking down baseball to each moment by moment. Maybe not necessarily in what some people think of baseball purists as, I want the game to stay like it was in the 1920s when Babe Ruth was eating a ton of hot dogs and hitting a lot of home runs. The game has changed. The world has changed. The world has evolved. I'm a baseball purist in the fact that I appreciate every little thing that happens on a baseball field. Most people, 99% of the people that go to baseball games, especially the ones that like go there to hang out, drink beer, eat food, they're not going to be paying attention to that. They'll be excited when they hit a home run. They'll be excited when their team wins, and that's about where the excitement ends for them. They like being with their friends. They like their team winning. They like to see people hit the ball far. That is a good majority, especially of our generation and the next generation, than what they enjoy, in my mind.
Okay, so as a baseball purist, then, are you not afraid that like steroids will like kind of tarnish the authenticity of baseball, like the purity of the game?
Baseball, almost more than any other sport, attaches itself to its past with numbers. Loves numbers, loves records. Numbers mean more than any other sport. I could ask some sport nerd out there, how many points did Kareem Abdul-Jabbar score in his career? They would know. Most people aren't going to know that. If you're a decent fan of Major League Baseball, Paul's looking up how many points Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I think it's something like
a lot,
somewhere between 26 and 32,000.
Yeah, so I mean that's a broad range. But if I asked you, Rob, who is a baseball fan, I wouldn't say passive baseball fan, but like you're not like the most historically accurate baseball person in the world.
Oh no, I follow the Phillies.
Yes. Who is the all-time home run leader in baseball? You're going to ruin my point here. Thanks. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry. I don't have it. No.
Most people would know that it was Barry Bonds, They would say Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron. Like, those are the three names that come to mind.
Sure.
Albert Pujols. Can't forget him.
He is now in the conversation because they have more than...
Wait, which one is it?
It's Barry Bonds, technically, but some people, obviously, because of steroids, don't think it's him. They would think it's Hank Aaron, who is one of the most amazing characters in the history of American sports. But so what I was saying is they attach themselves to that almost more than any other sport. Like, records in other sports are great. Drew Brees breaking passing records, Tom Brady passing his passing records are great, but no one really is going to remember them for that. Most other sports remember for winning. They remember for how many Super Bowls you won. Tom Brady has won 7 Super Bowls. How many championships LeBron's won? How many championships? Everybody knows Jordan went 6 for 6 in the finals. Like, these are things people know. People know more in baseball circles. I don't know how many World Series Babe Ruth won, and I know a lot about baseball. I know Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs. So there will be a disconnect when it comes to attaching yourself to its past because you won't be able to compare the numbers. But I think the past of baseball is the past. I think the numbers are there. They're always going to be there. Albert Pujols just hit 700 home runs. Everybody will be like, that's amazing. If baseball wants to go in the future, I think as much as I love diving into the numbers and seeing how people compare to each other and trying to compare different generations, I used to try to compare different generations, and now I realize there's no comparison. The difference between baseball now without steroids, it doesn't matter if there was steroids in it, and when Babe Ruth played, the way people pitch, how hard they throw, how much movement is on pitches, there's no comparison between the games anymore. So since, in my mind, I've went so far away from there being a comparison between Babe Ruth and Mike Trout, because Babe Ruth faced the same pitcher for 9 innings. Mike Trout had to face a different pitcher 3 times a game, and a guy that's throwing 110 miles an hour with a ball that's moving a foot like a wiffle ball. Like, there's no comparison anymore. Since there's no comparison in general, I don't think we need to worry about comparing steroids to non-steroids anymore, because The older group or the people that are number nerds might, but the only numbers people look at now is how can I win a baseball game? The WAR, the sabermetrics. Those are the numbers that matter now more than past records. It's still awesome that our Bulls hit 700 home runs this year. It was amazing to see. But if the future no one hits 500-600 home runs or they hit 800 home runs because they're taking steroids, I don't think people think, oh, that's the actual record. It'd be like, this was the pre-steroids record. This is the new baseball record. I think it's time to move on from trying to attach Babe Ruth to Mike Trout and just appreciate for Mike Trout for who he is and appreciate how crazy Babe Ruth was. Like this year with Shohei Ohtani, they literally compared him to Babe Ruth every other day. There's no comparison. But it's cool to look at, but that doesn't need to be done for popularity's sake. No one is thinking, you know what, I like to go to a baseball game. I want to see what the difference is between Shohei Ohtani and Babe Ruth. No, 90% of people that go to baseball want to be around the people, enjoy the nice weather of the summer, and watch their team win. That's it.
I'm going to be straight up honest with you. Didn't think this is the direction you were going to go. I like it. This is fun.
I know. I think you guys, knowing how big of a baseball fan I am, you would have thought, no, he's going to say no. There's no way you can have steroids in the game. I just think we've gone, honestly, in the last 2 years since I worked kind of in the baseball industry and heard more about and focused more on what the difference is in the game now compared to even in the 80s or the 90s before steroids. Like, it's so different. There's no reason not to say, you know what, if you all want to do it, we all agree you can. We are monitoring it to make sure that, to an extent, it's safe and healthy. Why not?
Side conversation, you're not okay with that in any other sport where they're making contact with each other.
Correct, because that affects their physical well-being. Football is already a dangerous enough game.
But if they all agree, what's it matter?
Then they're just stupid, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
They're just they already have safetied the game up 1,000% in football, which a lot of people complain about. I understand. The only thing that's driving people crazy right now is like the roughing the passer stuff. If I'm Tom Brady, steroids for me aren't going to do much for me. Like, I'm still going to be able to throw the ball maybe a little further, stay around a little longer, be able to throw the ball down the field a little more, all that kind of stuff. If Von Miller's taking steroids, he's stronger, faster, and now hits me harder.
Yeah, but can you imagine like a Von Miller playing quarterback? Because that's like the kind of thing that you might see with steroids.
He still has to take a hit.
And you take steroids and you can recover faster.
Because if you're getting hit in the brain, unless they find steroids that help your brains recover faster.
Steroids could thicken bones. And I mean, the one thing that they have shown is that people with thicker craniums have fewer concussions. So, what if
it is possible. There's no way you could tell me that it would help their health to be faster, stronger. There's more injuries now than there have ever been in football because they're faster and stronger. So now if you're getting them injected with steroids, making them faster and bigger and stronger than already the biggest, fastest athletes we've pretty much ever seen, all of a sudden you have 22 Bo Jacksons plus some ability running at each other, hitting each other. Because you don't. Also, when would you start steroids? Because baseball, there's a this conversation is going to go on for 2 hours. Baseball, there's like a definitive point. You get drafted, you can take steroids. You don't want to give them to growing teenagers that are in high school because you don't know how it's going to affect their body. Because we found, even with things that we found harmless like weed, after you're 26, it's kind of harmless for you. Before you're 26, it might affect your brain because it's still growing, kind of thing. So if you give steroids to kids in high school, it could massively affect them, even if they're healthy for adults. Football, you get drafted, you can take steroids. Baseball, you get drafted, but if the professional football players are taking them, all of a sudden the college football players are taking them to get faster and stronger so they can get acknowledged, and so on and so forth. I mean, maybe it happens in baseball too, but I just don't think there's that cutoff point that there would be in baseball to getting drafted as there would be in football. And like I said, I'm already terrified by football players when they get hit. I can't imagine Von Miller or Aaron Donald being faster and stronger and nailing somebody. Or on the other side, you give Derrick Henry, who already runs over people, steroids, and this little 180, 190-pound defensive back, because they still have to have certain builds for certain positions, come around the edge.
Not necessarily. Not with steroids. I mean, the one argument that Rob has in his notes is, leveling the playing field.
Yes, and that's
So,
what I said. If everybody agrees.
Wouldn't it be really entertaining to watch 22 Bo Jacksons face off against each other?
In a foot race.
Well, it would certainly change. Like, it would have to change, like, everything we understand. Like, in the case of football, like, you talked about a 180-pound, like, cornerback or something, right? Like,
Yes.
there's a good chance that all of that changes if everybody's taking steroids, right? Like, your cornerbacks might be able to be bigger and thicker because they're steroid, they're roided up or
So
whatever.
possibly. Here's my thought on that. I still think their genetics gives you a certain build. Obviously, it's going to be affected by steroids if you take them when you are 20 years old getting into the league of either baseball or football. There's a difference between Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco, and this is someone that has never been admittedly taken steroids, but I just think there's no way he didn't because of where he was with the Oakland A's in certain times. Ricky Henderson was fast, had some power, but if Jose Canseco ran into Ricky Henderson, one's going to win and one's not. And I think if I genetically take steroids, I'm 5'11", 195 pounds, but not I'm in okay shape, not the greatest shape. And then Rob, who nothing against Rob, is 5'7",
5'6",
5'6", takes steroids. Or Paul, who is a wider shouldered, broader individual, who is 6 foot flat, or like someone who's 6'5" takes steroids compared to Rob taking steroids, it's going to be a big difference. So I think if you are if you're going to literally hurt somebody else by tackling them, I just don't think you can apply steroids to that sport. Same basketball, there's a pretty good amount of contact. Steroids have never really been a thing in basketball as far as we know, so I don't think we need to go there. I think football and baseball are kind of like where it stays. But I think since there's no contact in baseball, it doesn't matter. Football is just, I don't want to see so many. Every time I watch a football game, if I knew they're all taking steroids, I'd be like, something bad could happen in this game. If baseball players are taking steroids, I'm like, it's still the same game. I'm not worrying about people getting hurt. Like, they're going to play the game, and it's going to be throwing the ball, hitting the ball, catching the ball.
So, like, okay, so let's get back to baseball because that's where we started,
That's fine,
right?
yes,
Right.
we can do it.
Are you not afraid of, like, you said if it's monitored, if it's safe, you'd be on board with it, which is, I think, an important caveat, right? But, like, if steroids are legal, isn't there like an almost an arms race to find the next drug or the next thing to make you bigger, faster, stronger, and you keep piling that up? Like right now you could argue that some of the stuff players are taking is legal or not legal just based arbitrarily and because they've drawn a line in the sand, right? We've heard of players like, oh, well, like I took this and I didn't realize that this supplement was...
Tatis apparently was treating himself for, I think, an infection or something. I can't remember exactly.
I think it was a
infection.
fungal infection or something.
Right,
Yeah.
so
He rubbed something on him that he didn't know had it in it, was tested positive, got suspended for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
Thank
so-
God, because if he was on the Padres or now the Phillies, probably wouldn't be having a chance.
So my question though is like that's already giving you like an arbitrary line in the sand, so to speak. If we just say free game, even with medical help, right? Don't we end up in situations where like people's health might be at risk just because like in order to still perform at a high level, now I have to take even more. I have to be even more extreme in what I put into my body.
I think since they're such competitive human beings, that's definitely a possibility. Because I was thinking like every steroid would be applied by a team doctor, by an MLB approved physician. But how then do you test for steroids that are illegal? I mean, I'm sure they could maybe be able to individualize test and be able to separate it. I don't know. I'm not scientifically there, as we talked about from the beginning. How do you then test for this steroid that is illegal because they don't know how it could affect the body yet, but someone just came out with it and they want to be the next best? Like we talked about with Barry Bonds. He took steroids to catch up to Sammy Sosa and was jealous of Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire and all the attention they were getting when he was one of the greatest players of all time, but he wasn't getting the attention. And I think it's pretty well known that that's why he took steroids and became the greatest hitter, physical freak ever to exist on a baseball field. So why would you not do that? So if Mike Trout is taking all these ingredients that are legal, because MLB says here, you can have this, 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 and this. They're going to help your performance. They're steroids, but we know they're going to be okay for you. But then Joe Schmo, halfway down the lineup of another team, is like, I want Mike Trout's getting all this attention. He's amazing. But this guy came to me and told me he has this new solution that'll make me as good as Mike Trout. I don't know how you would defend against that. How would you test? Is it possible to separate the test to find these individual things to make sure they're only taking what is legal? I'm not scientifically available to say that. But that kind of falls back into the category of the guys in the 90s. They took steroids to try to get ahead. They were willing to play with their bodies and their future life to have prosperity in the short term. Do you allow people to still do that? That's a good question. That's a great question. I think you do, because it's their bodies, and the only person they're harming is themselves. But, and again, they're not tackling people and hurting people. Then this brings it after you saying that, there's no way you allow in football, because you don't know what the person's going to take, and all of a sudden it could make them go from a 9-hitter on a team to Mike Trout football version and annihilate somebody. That's a good question, Rob. Yeah, you asked a good question to stump me there for a second that I have to think on a little bit, because how do you control another substance that someone just finds to get into the industry? Like I said, the only person it's affecting in the long term possibly is them.
But then that kind of tears down the whole like level playing field too, right? Because like if the person's risking their life, that's bad. But also like you just end up in the same situation, just with bigger, stronger, faster steroids.
Yeah,
so to speak.
And then is it the level playing field?
I'd even be okay with like MLB sanctioned steroids, and then just the ones that like aren't sanctioned you can't use, right? So any new one would have to undergo some sort of testing period, whatever. But I would be even more worried that you'd fracture this like baseball experience that we have. So right now there's like a pipeline for baseball players. They usually start when they're pretty young on travel teams, that kind of stuff. They get to high school. Then sometimes they go to college, or sometimes they go right into the minors. I'm pretty sure, right? So,
well, yeah, 90% of the time when you get drafted in the minors, you're there for a few years. Even Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, who went through the minors incredibly quickly, were still there for a year and a half. Most of the time you're there for 3-4 years at a time.
Yeah. So, like, I'm wondering, I mean, if steroids could fracture this baseball experience, because we know that minor leaguers don't get paid well. No. So
they finally unionized, so we'll see what happens.
You could be just as good as your paycheck, right? Because if you can't afford steroids, or like your team is just not that good, it's some backwater, single A affiliate, or, high A or whatever, like they might not be able to afford it, and they might become the laughing stock of like their league, right?
Yes.
But then also, like, so what do you do with high school players who are trying to develop into potential, like, Major League Baseball players or college players? I mean, like, the NCAA tries to maintain some sort of, like, modicum of amateurism. So, like, at what point do you allow for steroids? And then, like, if steroids level the playing field, right, in some sense, like, I mean, how I could just pick any random Joe Schmo from a high school and be like, you've got good attributes, that we could pump your body full of whatever, and you could be a great baseball player.
Pretty
but
much, if you're drafted by the Phillies for the last 10 years, you're a great athlete, but you're a terrible baseball player, but you'd be great with steroids. So there was one point you said in there about that you made an argument for, but I think it was an argument that should have went another direction, and I wouldn't even thought of it without you saying it. So you said if you're a backwater single A affiliate, for those who don't know how the minor league system works in baseball, each Major League Baseball team, the Yankees, the Phillies, have 3 or 4 teams associated with them to build up their prospects, to see who's good enough to make it to the Major League club. Sometimes you're there for 10 years. There's been plenty of minor leaguers that played a long time in the minor leagues. Sometimes, like friends of mine, you're there for 3 years and you realize this is not for me. You leave, you go back to college, you go to your normal life, wherever you wind up. So that's how they progress the minor league system. It's unlike any other sport there is, in America especially. If the people so say the Philadelphia's AA team is getting steroids.
I believe that's the Reading Fightin' Phils.
Yeah, the Reading Fightin' Phils Woo. Get steroids from the Phillies. The Yankees second AA affiliate get steroids from the Yankees. I don't think what affiliate you're with will matter if they're all MLB affiliated. Where it matters is, do teams then only give players they think have potential the steroids to advance? And then if you're not on the top of that list, do you then go try to look for your own steroids? I think that's where the conversation on the minor league side would go. If they're all Major League Baseball affiliates, I think the steroids could be passed down the ladder. I could be wrong because minor league baseball has been treated terrible for a long time. But I think if you're not maybe the top prospect, maybe they're like, we don't need to worry about his steroids this week.
But
I'm still not sure now that we talk about like fair play and like if it's broken, level playing field, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if I still fully believe that Major League Baseball should have steroids in it anymore. We'll get that in a second. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, we know that many minor league teams are affiliated with a major league club, but we know that those minor league teams aren't treated the same as those major league clubs, right? I mean, they're not treated to the same level of physical therapy, strength and conditioning, and just coaching in general. I mean, you're a lot of those teams are only as good as those kind of things that are part of baseball, right? I mean,
the people that own the organizations. And when I say own the organizations, the owner of the Yankees does not own the AAA, AA, single A affiliate. They're owned by separate people. They're just affiliated, and affiliation usually helps you, especially if you're a local team. I'm more likely to go see a Phillies top prospect than if I were to go. We used to have a team called the Camden River Sharks in the area that you went for fun because it was something to do.
It was a nice stadium.
Yeah, it was a nice stadium.
Surprisingly nice.
Yes, surprisingly nice stadium. So you're more likely to go to an affiliated team. So that's the reason it's good to be affiliated. But you're not owned by them. You're just associated. So yes, maybe they're not treated as well, obviously, as professional baseball players. But I think what it goes back to my argument about if you're the first overall pick, or you're Fernando Tatis Jr. before you become in the pros, or you're a top round pick or top prospect in baseball, Adley Rutschman, before he came up to the Orioles this year, they're going to treat you just as well. It doesn't matter what level you're at because they know who you are. So I think that same thing could happen with the steroids. The Orioles would have found a way to get Adley Rutschman the best steroids he could get, the best equipment, everything. But maybe the guy that's been in AA for the last 6 years and might not really show any promise, but they need someone down there. And maybe if he gets better here or there, but they might not give him the steroids. So I think what you're saying is true. They're not treated as well. It would even affect more on an individual basis than maybe a team-wide basis.
Just talking about the health argument, right? I mean, long term, in general, anabolic steroids are bad for health. I don't know of any. Put it in perspective. I don't know of any anabolic steroid that is good long term for somebody's health.
Yes, I understand that, and that's what I've assumed my whole life.
So with that assumption, then you're okay with like these guys just saying, whatever.
So
I
think I'm more into the HGH, human growth hormone thing, is what I think might be leaning more toward, and also because you're right. My whole life I've heard anabolic steroids aren't good for people, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that have had many of issues with them. But I look at Alex Rodriguez, I look at Barry Bonds, I look at Mark McGwire, I look at Sammy Sosa to an extent. That's a whole other story. They seem to be living normal, healthy lives, especially some of the ones, like I said, Mark McGwire is now in his 60s, I think, or late 50s. They seem to be having somewhat normal lives. I would think that the science has come far enough since the 90s that it would not affect them in the long term as much. That's my thought, my theory. It could be wrong, and we could have not advanced in steroids at all. I think we have, because they've at least advanced in how to hide them so they're not getting caught as much, at minimum, because I would think there's still steroids in the game today that are being hidden somehow and not being caught.
It's not that they're being hidden. It's just that it's a chemical that isn't searched for. Like they can't find it by any current test.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, and this steroids in general has become a blanket statement really for anything that you put in your body that helps you.
PEDs, performance enhancing.
Yeah, like that's kind of where we're at, and I think that's kind of what we've been talking to anyway, right? Like,
yeah. And I would specifically say performance enhancing drugs, not like blood doping. So like that's just injecting yourself with your own blood, or having somebody do that for you that enhances your performance for like endurance athletes and that kind of stuff. So. Yeah, I don't know. Should we capitulate here? Should we, or I guess recapitulate? Should we come back to the question at hand?
Yeah,
the core question.
The core question.
Zeke, should steroids be legal in baseball?
After discussion of where does that line end of when you can give people steroids, would people? Because I was thinking like it'll be a level playing field. If you want to take them, you have the option. If you don't want to take them, you don't have the option. But because of who humans are, and I feel like a lot of our human arguments are going to come down to this in the end, and our nature to be, especially competitive people, to try to get a leg up, to try to advance. Even when we legalize the thing that was not legal before, there's always someone that looks to go up above and beyond, especially in competitive atmospheres. Because of that human nature aspect, I don't think you can legalize steroids in baseball, because there's just no way to bring that human nature aspect back down to a level playing field. It's literally impossible. And I'm sure we're gonna have other conversations about that involve human nature. And when you initially asked this question, I'm thinking in my little la la land of like, everybody will follow the rules because we made something legal that wasn't legal before, and like everybody's going to play better and be healthier and all that kind of stuff. Cool, let's do it. But then it happens to me a lot when I think of things. Whenever you go back to the human nature of things, especially in competitive atmospheres, either through work or for athletics especially, you can't trust humans to just be like, all right, cool, now I can do something illegal. Maybe for a year, that legal thing that is now legal is good enough. But you're always going to look for the next leg up.
But people cheat now.
I know,
like,
but
regardless of what it is.
At least we tried to catch them, but it is cheating. There is that line where it is cheating. If we allow cheating, quote-unquote, steroids, PEDs, and they keep on trying to do leg up, I don't think there will ever be a... So it's either you let the dam break and let the water through and just like everything's free-for-all, as you said. You either have to not monitor anything, which could have terrible consequences and like black eyes and scars on baseball that may never heal, or you can, or you leave it as it is now. Because if you try to say, you know what, you guys are allowed to take steroids, here's the line, someone's still going to go over that. There's still going to be cheating. So you might as well prevent any access to cheating at all, is where I'm at right now, I think, because you can't trust humans not to step over that line. No matter what it is, they're always going to try to step over that line in competitive atmospheres because humans do that. They try to get ahead, especially in athletics, especially in American culture. It's get ahead, be the best, see what happens later. So if in a la-la world everybody went along with this new cheating of everybody having steroids, yeah, let them take them. But since points have been made and the argument kind of went back to human nature a little bit, I don't think you can let steroids in baseball.
So you think that, like, as it is right now, it's almost like the level of cheating that would be going on, or that does happen in whatever sport, I guess, particularly baseball, the level of cheating that's going on in baseball right now is sort of at an acceptable level, I guess. So and that it would be unacceptable if everyone's cheating and somebody's cheating worse. I'm just trying to pick this apart here.
I understand that. I appreciate it. You make my brain think a little more than I thought it wanted to think today. There's my statement for the day of things that don't make sense. I'm going to have one of those every episode. I know that. Because at least we know where the line is in cheating right now. No performance-enhancing drugs, not allowed, 0. I think once you murky the waters and say, well, these are allowed, but these aren't allowed. I think since you have a definitive line, yes, that is acceptable. There are people, I'm sure, that are getting away with cheating. They're taking stuff they're not supposed to be able to take that hasn't been detectable or we don't even know about yet, so there's no way to detect it. Because people that cheat are always ahead of people that don't in every aspect of life.
Aaron Judge. Sorry, I think he's going to pop.
I hope not.
Oh, I hope not too. But
he seems like a good dude. Even though I hate the Yankees, he seems like a good dude. I like Aaron Judge. Is it possible? Yeah. I mean, his numbers compared to everybody else in Major League Baseball this year, just on another level. He had a Barry Bonds type year, so it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I understand why you would think that.
He's also like 6'7", and
yeah, it helps that he's
ginormous.
He's a ginormous human being. But once you murky the waters and say these are allowed, these aren't allowed, and we're allowed to control it, but you guys aren't, that's when the players will be like, well, who are you guys to allow this and not allow that? Like, there are collective bargaining agreements, but I don't think they could have enough collective bargaining agreement, but like, well, we want this allowed and not this allowed. It would take too long already. We had a strike at the beginning of this year. The negotiations would take even longer. So line in the sand, everything is cheating. Because of human nature, I think is the only acceptable way to go.
Okay, so yeah, slippery slope. If you start to allow some level of cheating, it's just going to get worse and worse.
Yes, because at that point it wouldn't be cheating, but you're allowing certain outside influences in the game and others not. Like currently, there's nothing allowed. Like you got the ball, you got the glove, you got your bat, you got whatever you do in the gym, and that's what's allowed. That's it. So I think after thinking more about human nature, no, we can't allow steroids in baseball. We good with that?
That's a good conclusion.
Yeah, we got a ruling, I guess.
All right, so put that one in the golden rule book. Steroids are not allowed in baseball. And as always, we'd like to say, try to live by the real golden rule. Treat other people like you like to be treated. And even if you don't agree with them, and even if they think they're always right.
Thanks for listening to the show. Hosted by Zeke Spragg, anchored by Rob Yates and Paul Barnett. Produced by Paul for Razor Pig Productions. If you like it, be sure to subscribe and leave a positive rating. If you don't, thanks for listening all the way through anyway. Have a good one.